Hey guys, here's a little mini episode for you about the new pick for Kamala Harris as she is running for President of the United States. She is now running with Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Now, this is an interesting pick, and we will get into specifically why, but this is not your expected or typical pick when it comes to a VP nominee. And that is because he is not from a swing state. And you would expect someone as far left as Kamala Harris, as we talked about on Monday's episode. She was the farthest left member of Congress when she was in the Senate, the furthest left senator, and she is a radical in every sense of the word. On every single issue, she is as far left as you can possibly be. And so you would think to try to get the independent voters, the middle of the country voters that she really needs to win, that she would pick someone that was a little more moderate, that she would pick someone from a swing state even, like Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro definitely has more appeal to that working class base, some of which Kamala Harris really needs. He is certainly more moderate, especially his views on Israel. He had that really great moment after the man died at the Trump rally when Trump was shot just a couple weeks ago. He had this very unifying, nonpartisan speech that he gave after that I thought was very honoring of this victim. He could have been, I think, probably the smart pick for Kamala Harris, but, and this is good news for us, it's good news for Team Trump, she did not pick him. She picked Tim Walz. And Tim Walz is not only from deep blue Minnesota, which, as I said, is not a swing state, he is also a radical himself. In a post on X, Kamala Harris announced this morning, Tuesday morning, that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will be her running mate. She said, "I'm proud to announce that I've asked Tim Walz to be my running mate as a governor, a coach, a teacher, and a veteran. He's delivered for working families like his. It's great to have him on the team. Now let's get to work. Join us." So it's clear what she is doing here. She is vying for that constituency that I just described. It's the same reason why Democrats chose Joe Biden. And by Democrats choosing Joe Biden, in the primary for the 2020 election, I'm not talking about Democratic voters. I'm actually talking about the elites in the Democratic Party. They chose Joe Biden. They decided that he is going to have the broadest appeal. He's going to be able to reach those middle America people the best because he has the appearance of being normal. He has the appearance of just being a working class, moderate guy who cares about the blue collar worker. And so clearly that is who they are trying to appeal to with Tim Walz, just based on the language that Kamala Harris used there. However, when we look at who he is, that is just not an accurate description. So he's a 60-year-old white guy, but he has been a lefty for a very long time. For example, the Star Tribune reported that in 1999, Walz served as the faculty advisor for the Gay Straight Alliance Club at the school where he taught. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives as a Democrat in 2007. He beat the incumbent then. He was reelected in 2008, again in 2010, and then on until 2016, and then elected as the Minnesota governor in 2018. So if you think about everything that has happened since 2018, not just where a country has gone morally and with the sexual revolution, but also with COVID, also with the race-based riots that occurred in 2020, we have a pretty good run that we can look at to assess what kind of politician, what kind of person Tim Walz is. So let's go through some of these moral issues and then the issues that have come up in particular over the past 5 years. When we look at abortion, we can see a few things. In January 2023, Walz signed into law Minnesota legislation that includes no limitations on when a woman may end the life of her unborn baby. So through all 9 months for any reason without apology, that is the law thanks to Tim Walz in the state of Minnesota. Now people will say, well, it never ever happens. Women are never getting abortions at 40 weeks. Well, shouldn't we protect them just in case? if that's the case, if that never ever happens, shouldn't we put protections in place just so those full-term babies are not painfully slaughtered and dismembered, as is what happens in those later term abortions? But no, he says it doesn't matter. If you want to abort your 42-week baby, it is legal in the state of Minnesota for any reason. Walz said then of the so-called Protect Reproductive Options Act to Minnesotans, know that your access to reproductive health, which of course is a euphemism, a misnomer, and your right to make your own healthcare decisions are preserved and protected. And because of this law, that won't change with the political winds and the makeup of the Supreme Court. The legislation reads, every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about the individual's own reproductive health, which of course, abortion is not about reproductive health. The reproducing has already happened. You created this life. This life has its own DNA. It is a human being in every scientific way. And yet you are saying that it should be legal to kill this child. Do not delude yourself into thinking that this never happens, or that this is somehow okay, or that this has to be legal until we do XYZ other policy or other welfare option, whatever it is. You are wickedly lying to yourself if you are comforting yourself by that line of reasoning. This is the most evil thing you can stand for. Tim Walz, just like Kamala Harris, is for the brutal murder of babies through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason and paid for by the taxpayer. When it comes to LGBTQ policy, Walz issued an executive order ensuring that Minnesota children may obtain irreversible transgender surgeries and sterilizing hormone treatments, which proponents call quote unquote gender affirming care. The measures made Minnesota a quote trans refuge, supporters of the law said. Walz signed a law putting menstrual products in boys' bathrooms from grades 4th through 12th grade. That's disgusting. While signing his executive order, Walz held the hand of a 12-year-old boy who said he identified as a girl. What a pervert. Walz's executive order prevents other states from taking child protection action against parents who help their children, quote unquote, transition to a boy or a girl. So if parents decide they are going to go along with their son saying that they are Sally, and the parent says, okay, sure, you can get these drugs that will chemically castrate you, that will render you infertile for the rest of your life. There's no legal way, according to this law, for other states to take actions against these parents. And so what that means is parents can travel from, say, the state of Arkansas, or conservative state, to Minnesota to make sure that their minor daughter can get a double mastectomy to cut off both of her healthy breasts, or get chemically castrated if it is their son. It is a refuge for killing children. It is a refuge for brutalizing children outside of the womb who are deceived about their gender. That is the state of Minnesota under Governor Tim Walz. He also posted support for the book called Gender Queer in 2023, when Florida was pushing back against these pornographic materials being given to children in schools. He responds to Florida's actions by saying, ridiculous. While we're focused on banishing hunger with free breakfast and lunch, they're focused on banning books, bullying LGBTQ plus students, and attacking teachers. Well, that is laughable, considering it's the Democrats under Joe Biden, his Department of Agriculture, that said you will not get SNAP benefits, as we talked about on Monday. You will not get SNAP benefits. That's free school lunches for poor kids at your public school if you do not allow boys into girls' bathrooms. That's the Democratic Party. Don't believe all of this nonsense that says that they care about feeding children. They might care about feeding children only if you allow boys into girls' locker rooms. That's what he stands for. That's what the Harris-Walz ticket stands for. And then, of course, if you look at the Black Lives Matter riots, that movement that was happening in 2020, of course, George Floyd died around Minneapolis. And so that's where many of these riots started. When rioters burned and looted the Minnesota cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul following the death of George Floyd, Walz waited days to act. He did nothing. Floyd died on May 25th. The riots began on May 26th, resulting and more than $500 million in damages to the Twin Cities, according to the Star Tribune. But it's more than that. It's more than just money. We're talking about lives ruined. We're talking about people killed. We're talking about poor people that weren't able to access the things that they need to survive in those towns because they were being ransacked by the people that Governor Walz allowed to act violently. Walz waited until May 28th to deploy the National Guard. Walz accepted some responsibility for the violence and chaos. He said, if the issue was the state should have moved faster, yeah, that is on me. That is on me. Trump needs to play that over and over again with the depictions of the fire and the looting and the riots in the background, Walz saying, that is on me, as Minnesota burned to the ground. But Walz expressed sympathy for these anti-police rioters in a May 29th press conference. He says the very tools that we need to use to get to control, to make sure that buildings aren't burned and the rule of law collapses, are those very institutional tools that have led to that grief and pain. Absolutely ridiculous. Also on illegal immigration, Walz and Kamala Harris, they're working hand in hand to make sure that the border is open, that there are more Laken Rileys, more young women that are brutally murdered and raped by illegal aliens. As governor, Walz signed several pieces of legislation to provide state-funded health care, driver's license, and free college tuition to illegal aliens. That is incentivizing people from these countries to come into our border, come across our border illegally. A lot of those people are going to be they're not going to commit additional crimes in addition to crossing the border, but many of them will. We already have criminals who are citizens. The last thing we do is add more criminals who are not citizens, who we can't even track, and who we are encouraging and incentivizing to come over the border by giving them all the benefits of citizenry. That is such a radical position. You are basically saying America is not a legitimate country because we don't recognize any special right or privilege of your citizenship. So America is not a sovereign country. That's what Kamala Harris and Walz believe. They are hell-bent on the destruction of the United States. That's what they have in common. That's what Walz was chosen for. When we look at COVID-19 and what a disaster that was for Minnesota, you guys who live in Minnesota, you know that, how your kids had to miss out on schools and how many of them, especially special needs kids, regressed so much because of school shutdowns and his radical position on those things. He used emergency powers during the pandemic, including the institution of mask mandates, shutting down businesses, also a hotline number established to report people violating social distancing guidelines. I mean, how Orwellian is that? The Upper Midwest Law Center filed several lawsuits against Walz for misinterpreting the Minnesota Emergency Management Act and illegally bypassing state lawmakers when issuing a peacetime emergency. He also made all state employees get the vaccine or they were fired. So just imagine what life would be like in America if Kamala Harris and this guy, Walz, are in the White House. You're losing your freedoms. You are losing your prosperity. Every economic policy that they have encourages even more inflation. You are losing any sense of stability or peace that we can hope to have and that we did have under Donald Trump. You are looking at a loss of your free speech rights, your freedom of religion rights, especially in a pandemic. But as we talked about on Monday with Kamala Harris, she is after those rights no matter what. If they stand in the way of abortion, if they stand in the way of a man going into a girl's locker room, she will come after your right to criticize these things. He also just signed into law last year the legalization of marijuana, as we've talked about quite a few times. That always leads to disarray. It always leads to chaos. It always leads to increased poverty. Minnesotans with minor marijuana convictions are also eligible to have their criminal records expunged, and residents from communities of color, so-called, which were disproportionately targeted for arrest, they say, and convictions for possession for decades, are given preferential status in applying for cannabis-related business license. I mean, that's just a great way to actually further decimate that community there. Now, it is also notable that she chose someone who represents a very large Somali Muslim population in Minnesota. Also, he is very much supported by members of the squad like Ilhan Omar, who, of course, is a far left radical, very anti Israel. And she chose this person who represents this large Muslim population over the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania, who is pro-Israel. And I think that's very notable that Kamala Harris is on the side of the pro-Palestinian protesters. So is Governor Walz, the people who were burning American flags, who have desecrated our college campuses, desecrated our Capitol, desecrated the Liberty Bell, desecrated these symbols that stand for American strength. Kamala Harris and Walz are for those things. They support those people. They're sympathetic towards those people. That's why she chose Governor Walz. And that is who they are. That is who this ticket is. And so if your friends weren't previously motivated to make sure that they are voting for Trump and Vance, voting against this ticket at the very least, even if they don't like who's on the Republican ticket, we're never going to have a perfect candidate, by the way. At least allow them to be mobilized against this radical far left ticket that will precipitate the demise of the United States. I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not. Now, is God absolutely sovereign and in control? Is Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever? Absolutely. God's will stands. The eternal plan of redemption is always going off without a hitch. We always have a reason to rejoice because Christians have always had it hard in our 2,000-year history. We have always been on the margins. We have always been a light in the darkness. And so even as the darkness gets darker, we have an opportunity to shine even brighter. And so I am not trying to steal your joy. I am trying to lay out how serious this is, that yes, Jesus is coming back. He claims the victory, but we're not there yet. And therefore we do have a responsibility to make the world around us better. We were not placed here arbitrarily or accidentally. We are exiles in this world, but we are called to be good citizens. One way, not the only way, but one way to love our neighbor is to vote, is to care about the policies that affect them. Why? Because politics matter, because policy matters, because people matter. People matter to God. They matter to us right here in this life, not just in the eternal, but right now. And however much we might not like politics, that's just the reality. So get engaged, get your friends engaged. Make sure you vote against this wicked ticket in November. All right, that's all we have time for on that. We will be back here tomorrow.